Hello friends, this is Dr. Burton Shapiro. I'm here to discuss the coronavirus, the novel COVID-19 outbreak of 2020. So the purpose of this presentation is so that I can say that you can also stay safe, informed, and empowered. Yes, empowered. The purpose here is to explain what the novel COVID-19 infection is, how we got here, what's the prognosis, how we can follow the CDC guidelines, and how we can help ourselves beyond the CDC guidelines. Let's discuss first, what is a virus? A virus is made up of a core of genetic material, either DNA or RNA, surrounded by a protective coat called the capsid, like a capsule around it, which is made up of more protein. Sometimes the capsid is surrounded by an additional spiky coat called the envelope. Viruses are capable of latching onto host cells and getting inside of them. In this case, human lung tissue, human cells. So what is this virus? The exact structure of a virus is dependent upon which species it serves as its host. See, viruses are not living cells. They kind of act like something alive, but they need a host, whether it's an animal or human. Yes, we are animals. A virus which replicates in mammalian cells, human cells, can have a protein coat that enables it to attach and infiltrate our cells. The shape, the structure, and the function of these proteins on the surface depend on the species of the virus. There are many kinds of viruses. In a moment, we'll talk about the anatomy of such a virus. Though there's the COVID-19 that we're experiencing now, the influenza virus, look at the similarities in shape. A bacteriophage is a virus that affects only bacteria. There's the Ebola virus, adenovirus, papillomavirus, rotavirus, many different sizes, types, and shapes. So let's look for a moment at the anatomy. The basic virus anatomy, in this case, this type of anatomy, in the center has a viral genome that tells it what it is and how to function. Then it has a capsule around that. As we step out, it has the integument, kind of like the parts inside of it and its wall. Then an envelope, which is made of protein, and then further spiky proteins. Those are the locks or the keys that go into our human locks. So how big is this virus? Let's look at a human hair for comparison. So we measure light waves, light, white, green, blue, yellow lights in wavelengths. And the smallest virus is only about 17 nanometers. We measure light in nanometers. We can measure these so tiny that they're measured in nanometers. The largest viruses can be as much as 15,000 nanometers. Sounds big, right? Not so much. The width of a human hair is over or about 20,000 nanometers across. A human hair is 20,000 nanometers. So let's look at the function now that we have an idea of the anatomy.
Every cell in your body is a tiny factory, constantly making proteins. Your genetic code, or DNA, directs every activity. Protein-making machinery in the cell reads the cell's own DNA and makes sure the cell proteins go where they're needed. Viruses have their own genetic code, but they don't have the machinery to copy their DNA. So viruses need your cell's machinery to reproduce themselves. A virus starts this process by using the keys on its surface to gain entry. Like a Trojan horse, it enters the cell. The virus releases its own DNA into the unsuspecting cell and hijacks the protein-making machinery. Now, this vital cell function becomes an assembly line for new virus particles. No longer in service to your body, the cell now serves the virus, manufacturing thousands of new virus particles, which are released to enslave more cells. thousands and thousands more.
The viruses have a typical structure. They have the genome, again, surrounded by the shield of proteins, and various types of proteins make that envelope, and that bonds to the human host. And then part of the protein coat will then enter the cell, open up, and make its way through the cell membrane, in this case, lung tissue.
Contact. This is the moment when infection begins. How does infection happen? You see the tiny shapes there on the virus particle's surface? They seem like random blobs. In reality, they are tiny keys, proteins that have evolved to the perfect shape and size, enabling them to unlock these receptors on the surface of this lung cell. Like a smile and a handshake, the virus deceives this lung cell and is welcomed in, where it will command the cell to make more virus particles.
Then the genome will replace and replicate itself over and over again within the host cell. It takes it hostage, and then the host cell then produces more and more viruses. It literally destroys its host, in this case the lung tissue. The replicated molecules then will be repackaged, sent out, and then shedded from our lungs through our respiratory tracts, so the air that we breathe, the air we exhale, coughs, sneezes, all come out into the environment so that they can spread and find another host. Now we're talking about pandemics and epidemics. Well, we're in the midst of a worldwide pandemic, but we also experienced a couple of epidemics. Let's look at Merriam-Webster's definition. An epidemic affects or tends to affect disproportionately large numbers of individuals within a population, community, region, all at the same time. In this case, it was Wuhan in China. Northern Italy is experiencing an epidemic. The rest of the world, including the United States, is experiencing a pandemic. It's an occurrence in which a disease spreads very quickly and affects a large number of people over a wide area throughout the world. Let's talk about the breaking news now. What's going on in this situation? Well, we have a novel coronavirus. We call it COVID-19. How did we come up with such a name? COVID, corona, V for virus, D for disease. Coronavirus disease, it has a crown around it. It occurred first in December 1st, 2019 in Wuhan, China. So it received the distinction for 19. It's novel because we have no immunity. Our bodies, our society has never quite seen this before. Now, this disease came from the SARS disease. We've all heard of the SARS virus. Okay, well, SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, CoV, also known as CoV-2, coronavirus from 2002. So it causes the corona disease that we see now, COVID-19. The United States Centers for Disease Control is responding to this outbreak, and it causes this new coronavirus that was detected in Hubei province in Wuhan City, December 1st, 2019. This infodemic, as Dr. Popescu calls it, Dr. Saskia Popescu came up with the name infodemic because whatever channel you look at, whatever station you listen to is talking about all types of information about this virus. Some of it's real, some of it's false, some of it is just insane. It's an infodemic. You can't avoid information. But let's talk more seriously about how we got here. There are two things that take place with these viruses. One is called shift, the other is called drift. Let's talk most commonly first about drift. Drift is what comes around every year. We have the influenza, we have different viruses, and they're predictable as we see them come out of the Far East. And that, as the virus replicates and evolves, causes drift. And we can adapt. We have some immunity to this.
Antibodies to this year's virus may not attach to the surface of next year's virus.
But when a virus jumps, often from a different species, and becomes something that we've never seen before, it's considered a shift.
One that no human immune system has ever seen before. So instead of the keys gradually changing, the new virus keys have changed completely and all at once. This is antigenic shift. And such dramatic change has the potential to make everyone on the planet sick.
In this case, the COVID-19 made the shift. And here's how it came. It started with bats in the Far East. The whole coronavirus scheme often comes from the bats. The bats then infect civets, which are cat-like individuals, and that causes the SARS-CoV-2 from 2002. That caused the SARS coronavirus of 2002. Then bats also infected camels, and that became MERS, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. That was CoV-12. It was a coronavirus from 2012. And now, in 2019, it appears that the bats infected an animal called a pangolin. What is a pangolin? Most of us have never heard of this before. A pangolin kind of looks like an anteater, but it has scales. And some believe that the scales have healing properties, so those parts are shipped all over the world and potentially can spread a disease. Well, it seemed like it made a jump in Wuhan, China, in a wet market where they chop up all kinds of animals for food, believe it or not, and it seemed to make the jump to humans. We don't know if the workers there are unhealthy and susceptible. We just don't know, but we know it made the jump. Currently, there are about 400,000 cases of COVID-19 in the world. We're seeing many people die from this. Now, compared to the influenza virus, a flu tends to infect one person, who infects one person, who infects one person. In this case, what's novel, because we have no immunity to it, this COVID-19 seems that one person affects three, who infect three, and infect three. So you can see how it's exponential. And in some areas, we have the epidemic, as mentioned earlier. Wuhan, China, which is now showing signs of recovery. Italy, which is not. So protection measures have been taken, and we're hoping to move forward. So let's take this and look, what are the signs and symptoms of COVID-19? According to the Centers for Disease Control, most commonly, we see fever, and especially in this case, a high fever, 103 or above. It may not last long, but there is a spike. There's definitely a cough. The interesting thing is there's some phlegm, but it's very thick and not very productive. So it sounds like a dry cough, and shortness of breath. And I don't mean a little tightness, I mean severe shortness of breath. So that's distinctive. Those three things are the most distinctive. So let's take a comparison. Let's just get an idea. What's the difference between the common cold, the flu, and coronavirus? As we see in this chart, fever is very common, but it's that spiked high fever with coronavirus that's important. Severe fatigue. You see that with the flu, but very severe fatigue with coronavirus. They all give you a cough, all three disorders, Sneezing is sometimes there with the coronavirus. It's more common with common cold. But with the flu and cold, you get aches and pains and a runny nose and a sore throat. You can also get that with the coronavirus. Hard to distinguish between them. Diarrhea? Well, with the common cold, you usually don't get that. The flu and coronavirus, you can. Headaches. Even though they say it's common with the cold and flu, but uncommon in coronavirus, that fever can cause a fever headache. So it's hard to distinguish. But here's the key. You get some tightness with coughing with the cold or a flu potentially, but the coronavirus gives you difficulty breathing, true shortness of breath. Coronaviruses are largely from a family of viruses that come from many different species of animals, including camels, cattle, cats, and bats. Rarely, though, the animal coronavirus can infect people and then spread between people. But it can happen, like with MERS, Middle Eastern, or SARS that came from the Far East, and now the COVID-19 virus. Its origin may have all come from bats. All three of the viruses having their foundation in bats and seen in sequences from the patients in America that are similar to the ones in China. So now we think that it's a single species reservoir that caused this. Early on, many of the patients in the outbreak in China had some link to the large seafood and live animal markets that suggested animal to person to person. Later, a growing number of patients reported they did have exposure from animal markets. That means it was truly person to person. And we'll take a look at some of these wet markets. As you can see, some of the animals are dissected or butchered just on dirty, filthy floors, tabletops that are not very clean. The meats are hung out in public. The animals are not kept in clean, sanitary conditions. The workers don't practice proper hygiene. So it's really a beginning point for disease. And it led to this serious problem in Wuhan. So we'll look at the illness severity. Both MERS and SARS are coronaviruses. They've been known for a long time. As mentioned, the coronavirus was first identified in 1935. The human coronavirus, 1965. And then now we understand. And the illnesses range from mild to severe and some in death. So we have to take a risk assessment. Viruses among humans is a true health concern. It depends on the characteristics of the virus and future vaccines to ameliorate the problem, to help treat. The disease that has caused illness, including those from person to person, is a concerning spread. It's a pandemic right now. But individual risks are dependent upon exposure. So it's an immediate health risk. We need to segregate at this point. But we can overcome this. So the healthcare providers and hospitals may become overwhelmed. At this time, there's no vaccine to prevent against COVID-19, no medications to treat it. Non-pharmaceutical interventions would be the most important response strategy. The CDC response, there's a global effect in this time to focus on this virus and mitigating its impact. The government is working with partners in state, local, and tribal and territory areas to help ameliorate this. The public health response is multi-layered. There are detection kits, and they're mostly looking at the SARS-CoV-2 as a way to identify it. So how is COVID-19 spread? Most commonly in droplets and sneezes. Masks don't really help. Those who are sick can use a mask to prevent from spreading it. So they're designed to prevent just the cough from affecting other people. In order for someone to pass the coronavirus to another, that person has to send droplets 3 to 6 feet across with the sneeze. It can last from hours to even a few days on some surfaces. So what can we do? Well, we can wash our hands, avoid people in the public, stay vigilant, use special cleaners, Is there more that we can do? Yes. Besides the usual over-the-counter respiratory viral anti-inflammatory preparations like acetaminophen, Tylenol, there's a novel approach that utilizes the tenets of traditional Chinese medicine for prevention and, in some cases, the management once you're sick. Please note that the concepts discussed here are not to be used in place of traditional Western medicine. This is complementary. They are to be integrated into a comprehensive prevention/treatment plan utilizing both Western and Chinese medicine to assure optimal health outcomes. It's not a one prescription fits all course of care. There are phases. You don't take one medicine and hope for the best. There's a prevention phase to prevent and promote your immune system to alleviate early symptoms and shorten the possible duration. There are other facets like the influenza phase, the pneumonia phase, the recovery phase. These are not one prescription serves all types of care. They are professionally individualized. And I can provide that type of care, and I'll have some great ideas for you in my newsletter that we'll discuss later. In Chinese history, whenever a plague was rampant, Chinese medicine practitioners were always on the front lines of the battle. Communities served and were helped with Chinese medicines. And once again, it could be a primary role in effective prevention and treatment of COVID-19. I'm here to serve. I'm here to empower you. I'm here to educate. Thank you. This is Dr. Burton Shapiro asking you to hit the button below to receive my free video newsletter explaining more about this virus and what you can do to empower yourself. Think of it. Even if you become ill, support your family. Prevention is the key. Again, thank you for watching. I'm Dr. Burton Shapiro.